Hallo, hallo, Shanghai.
The telephone led directly to the talking picture.
Oui, j'écoute. Ja, bitte. Yes, please. Oui, j'écoute. Sì, pronto. Magic.
Would the talking picture destroy an international language? Would it sweep away all that Europe had learned in the silent era? Silent films existed for a while alongside talkies. This portrait of Berlin showed the end of summer at the end of a decade. The troubles that had plagued Germany since the end of the Great War seemed to have receded. A group of young hopefuls pooled their resources to make this film. They made it silent, and it was a great success. But it was one of the last silent films to be made in Europe. Silent films had reached their peak by 1929. They had become an international language. In this film, scripted by René Clair and G.W. Pabst and directed by the Italian Augusto Giannina, Louise Brooks plays a star watching her first sound performance. Louise Brooks, who was American, was dubbed by a French actress. This was a silent converted midway to sound. Many people felt passionately that the new invention would kill the art of film. But sound was inevitable. Two events would change the history of Europe and its cinema. The Wall Street crash would undermine the world's financial markets, bringing mass unemployment back to Germany and creating the conditions for the rise of nationalism. 2 years earlier, the release of The Jazz Singer had brought sound to America. In Europe, it was first shown silent. When the sound version arrived, the silent era ended. The Vitaphone system was used. Sound on disc run in synchronization with the picture. George Pearson saw The Jazz Singer in London at the Piccadilly Theatre.
I was sitting with my wife. I said, "My dear, do you know, we've been present at the death of the silent picture."
The silent film was never silent. There was always live music, often full orchestras. What happened when the music had to stop?
Thousands of musicians were thrown out of work when the silent cinemas were being turned over into sound theatres, and I was one of those musicians who lost a job as a result of the talkies coming into London.
Outside the railway station was a gentleman playing the violin, well dressed but shabby. On the pavement, between his feet, his trubby hat. Passers-by were dropping pennies into it. Round his neck, he'd hung a placard on his chest, and it read, just simply, "Ruined by the talkies."
Anna, qu'est-ce que t'attends? Anna, qu'est-ce que t'attends?
Sound had been tried almost from the beginning. Like Vitaphone, this Gaumont system used sound on disc.
Anna, qu'est-ce que t'attends? Fricot est épatant.
This unique shot shows Gaumond's first director, Alice Guy, putting on a record for playback for a dance sequence. Hepworth introduced a disc system in England in 1907. Made to fit any projector, it cost only 5 guineas. But in a garden in Brixton, a Frenchman called Eugene Laust created a totally new process, sound on film. No one wanted to back him. An Englishman, Grindal Matthews, created another optical process in 1922, while 2 Danish engineers, Peterson and Poulsen, developed a more successful system.
Mine damer og herrer, nu skal de høre en lille historie.
This test by Axel Peterson was never shown because the separate soundtrack ran out before the end.
Kan de se, hvad det er der? Det er en ocarina. Kan de høre? Nu skal vi høre, om den kan fløjte.
Their first presentation was in 1923, and patents were eventually sold across Europe. 3 German engineers had developed a system which Ufer bought but failed to exploit. A sound short 2 years before the jazz singer with former Chancellor Stresemann.
Der kinematografischen und fotografischen Ausstellung, die am heutigen Tag eröffnet wird, spreche ich meine besten Wünsche aus für ihren Verlauf und für den Erfolg der Veranstaltung.
The American Lee DeForest's phono films were established in England, where dozens of short films were made with theatrical and music hall personalities. The studio in Clapham could not have been more unfortunately placed.
The studio was situated right by the railway line, which was just behind the studio, and we had a warning system that when a train was coming, we had to pack everything up and start again.
The studio was also far too small. These girls were accustomed to the stage of the Victoria Palace, and one of them falls over. But there was no money for a retake. For a while, it seemed as if sound would only be used for short films, for songs and monologues. These did, however, preserve acts which would otherwise have been forgotten.
When they got married today, if you please, I was down on it, but I made a game. Why am I always around? I never looking round. Ding dong, wedding, only ring of I shall wake up in the morning of my
The arrival of the jazz singer in London forced big studios like BIP in Elstree to experiment. BIP was in production with a film starring Jon Stewart and Estelle Brody. It was released as a silent when the decision was made to reshoot the last reel with sound. But in 1928, BIP had no sound installation. Director Victor Saville took his leading players to New York.
Well, it rather hit the audience like a bomb, you know. They're sitting there watching this silent stuff with all these subtitles, and then suddenly these voices came out of the screen, amazed everybody. It caused quite a sensation in the cinema.
Alec.
Kitty. Speak to me, Kitty.
Somehow I can't.
Oh, my dear, my dear. I was so relieved to see this girl who was playing my wife, who had kidnapped me, that I just, that's all I could say, oh, my dear. And those were the 3 words that I always remember, because it was the first words I ever spoke in a talking picture.
So successful was this experiment that BIP decided to install the American RCA sound-on-film system. They converted a prop shed into a makeshift soundstage.
Damn brat.
White Cargo, a silent film, was converted to sound.
Damn brat.
The cameraman for the sound sequences was Freddie Young, later Britain's most successful cinematographer.
The studio was airless, no doors open, no windows open, and heavily padded with blankets and so on.
Included in the talkie were shots made for the silent version. But in the talkie scenes, the actress has a different wig.
No, it's all right. No. Kevin, who are you?
I am from below.
Oh, really?
We worked all day and all night for 2 or 3 days without stopping. The actors would just lie on the floor and go to sleep when they weren't working. And I had to go on with my eyes hanging out of my head practically. And we had to get out by Friday night, because on Saturday morning Hitchcock was coming in to do the same thing with Blackmail.
Blackmail was also shot as a silent film. It was the story of a girl picked up by an artist who stabs him to death when he tries to seduce her. The director was Alfred Hitchcock, well known for his skittishness and practical joking. These home movies were shot by assistant cameraman Ronald Neame. Blackmail, as a silent, some of it shot in German style, promised to be an exceptionally fine piece of work. BIP told Hitchcock to redo the last reel in sound.
I thought it might be nice, without telling them, if I made the whole picture in sound. And in fact, it was done in a very furtive manner, because I was so scared of the front office stopping it that I had a boy on the studio door to give me a word when the big shots were on their way.
Hitchcock conducted sound tests. His leading lady was a Czech actress called Annie Ondra.
Now, Miss Ondra, you asked me to let you hear your voice on the talking picture.
But Hitch, you mustn't do that.
Why not?
Well, because I can speak well.
Do you realize the squad van will be here any moment?
No, really. Oh, my God, I'm terribly frightened.
Why? Have you been a bad woman or something?
Well, not just bad, but...
But you slept with men?
Oh, no!
You have not. Come here. Stand in your place. Otherwise, it will not come out right, as the girl said to the soldier. That's enough.
Joan Barry was brought in to provide a new voice for Annie Ondra.
Annie Ondra would be miming the lines on the set, and this other actress, Joan Barry was her name, was speaking into a microphone, and somehow or other they managed to synchronize.
Well, I don't think I want to go to the pictures.
Oh, and why not?
I've seen everything worth seeing.
You haven't seen Fingerprints. I'd like you to see that. Still, it's about Scotland Yard. It might be amusing. They're bound to get all the details wrong.
I don't see why. I did hear they'd got a real criminal to direct it.
And the whole studio and all the big shots all went down to Madame Tussauds cinema to hear the first day's work. And there was a lot of bumps and scratches and noises as the film started on. And then the voices, it was a little scene in Scotland Yard, and the voices, the mouths began to open and no sound came out except a and that was the end of the evening. We all went home.
In the silent version, a neighbour gossips about the murder. The girl is mesmerised by the bread knife, similar to the murder weapon. Dallas Bauer, pioneer sound recordist, was called in by BIP's laboratory head, Gary Schwartz.
Schwartz asked me and David Cunningham, my assistant, if we would make a wild track of a figure saying the word knife. And so this we did. And Hitch was brought in, I think, to listen on a duplicate pair of headphones to mine, you see. And he seemed impressed, although I don't think he really quite knew what was going on, if you want to know the truth.
A good, clean, honest whack over the head with a brick is one thing. There's something British about that. But knives... No.
Hitchcock soon came to understand more about sound than almost any filmmaker.
Now, mind you, a knife is a difficult thing to handle. I mean, any knife. I mean, if you use a knife, or a pocket knife, they wouldn't belong in them. A butcher's knife.
Alice, cut us a bit of bread, will you?
Knife. What's that other knife? Knife. A knife is a dangerous thing. Be careful of a knife. You come up against a knife. Oh, no. I mean, in Chelsea, you mustn't use a knife!
Yeah, you ought to have been more careful. Might have cut somebody with that.
Blackmail was a tremendous critical and popular success. Other European producers who had tried to ignore sound now looked to Elstree. The first French talkie had to be made at BIP because no studio in France was wired for sound.
Philippot, tu le vois le gigot?
Ah, c'est une bonne bouteille.
La santé d'Edel Lacorba, hein?
Mais le père ne voudra pas la sortir.
For a few exciting months, the British thought the world would come to Elstree. But the French hastily equipped studios at Billancourt and Joinville, and in November 1929 they made their first sound film at Joinville with a French crew. The technique was fluid, betraying none of the static quality of the first American talkies. The actor's American accent was not so assured.
Now leave me alone, Mary. Laissez-moi. I'll knock him down, you know. Say, come on, you, come on.
Eh ben, qu'est-ce qu'il lui passe, zigoto, là? Laisse, Nénès, laisse.
Laissez-moi, laissez-moi. Je vais vous apprendre à battre les femmes.
De quoi? Non, mais vous êtes cinglé, vous.
Non, pas anglais. American, I am. Je suis American.
The Americans set up their European base at Joinville and rushed out 100 features and 50 shorts in 14 languages. On location at the Eiffel Tower was a British crew from Gainsborough Studios.
When we came back from Paris, the whole of the film industry had gone mad and talkies had come to stay. So they decided to put dialogue in halfway through the film. They didn't take into consideration our voices. I, who had never been trained for the stage at all, had this little sort of Minnie Mouse squeak.
No, Richard. I can't come with you. I'm going to be a famous toe dancer.
Poor child. You don't know what a terrible thing is happening to you.
Will you drop the mic down, Arthur?
The sound recordist was all-powerful.
All his instructions were shouted through a thing on the roof. Everything he wanted us to do, speak up or go close or something, that used to come booming forth like the voice of God. And it was always, speak up, Miss Boucher, speak up, because It's a tiny voice.
Chili Bouchier worked with the silent star Mabel Poulton, who became Britain's first victim of sound.
It was very unfortunate for me because at that time I just finished playing in The Constant Nymph, and I was a very big success, a silent picture with Ivor Novello, and I had masses of offers. And my studio, who I'd been working for tuppence halfpenny in those days, were going to give me a marvellous contract for £5,000 a year, which was coming for me to sign in a few days. Then, of course, Cockney accent, that was that, out of work again.
Another great silent actress was Lillian Hall Davis.
I think the tragedy of her, I've never been more shocked. And you just woke up one morning and she'd cut her throat, you know, it was really dreadful. And she was such a almost conventionally, very neat, beautifully groomed, simplish girl, not very sophisticated, not wild at all. Oh no, it was that was a dreadful tragedy.
In France, the first victims were the Russian émigrés. Shakatuni, who played Pozzo di Borgo in Napoleon, spoke little French and became a make-up man. Ivan Muzhukin's enormous popularity waned, although he carried on despite a heavy accent.
Ça a été dramatique pour certains acteurs. Puis il y avait les accents aussi. Tout le monde n'avait pas... L'accent très parisien vous faisait immédiatement empêcher certains films, certains rôles que vous ne pouviez pas assumer. Tandis qu'au muet, on ne vous entendait pas.
There was another hazard for sound films, yet audiences were fascinated to hear such effects. A glimpse into the future, into an England of 1950, where there might be a tunnel under the English Channel. High Treason was made as a silent film and then remade in sound using the Peterson-Poulsen system renamed British Acoustic. Directed by Maurice Elvey, it was a plea for peace and tolerance, showing how the horrors of terrorism could lead to war. The newspaper critics welcomed the film.
Ah, here, Mr. Elvey. Mr. Elvey. Have you seen it?
Yes, absolutely marvellous.
Oh, absolutely wonderful.
Very, very good.
Very good indeed.
Do you share what Atkinson said about our actors?
No, but...
He said, of course, all those ladies and gentlemen out there are supposed to think that we haven't rehearsed. Whereas, as a matter of fact, we know we have.
The silent version may have been better directed than the sound, but it was still dependent on subtitles. There was no doubt which version the public preferred.
I'm on the verge of declaring something much more important than war, if you'll only dine with me tonight. Hello. 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 Oh, damn.
Isn't your wavelength working all right?
Of course it is. Fade away, miss. There's a war on. I'm not talking to you.
The biggest of all the early European sound films was directed by the German E.A. Dupont, based on the sinking of the Titanic. In Berlin, it was regarded as the first 100% German talkie. It was actually made at BIP in Elstree. The Americans hoped to make English a universal language through the talkies, an idea which outraged the Europeans. Atlantic was the first film to be made in 3 languages. Charles Rocher, the top Hollywood cameraman, British by birth, was brought over to work with DuPont. There was a striking difference between the direction of the German and English versions.
Der ganze Schlamassel hat uns alle ein wenig aus der Fassung gebracht, was? Na, kommen Sie mit mir. Wir trinken was Warmes, wird Ihnen gut tun, bevor Sie Ihre kleine Rundreise auf dem Ententeich antreten.
Dankeschön.
DuPont worked less happily in English.
Monica, we're all a bit upset with this Schlamassel. Come and have something to warm you before you go on your little trip round the lake.
So nice of you.
The Germans preferred a slower pace.
DuPont, the director, had this Teutonic way of doing things on the heavy line, you know, so that it was a bit slow, but we relied on him and we thought, well, I suppose it's all right.
Why me? Well, sir, this is no time for mincing matters. You can't look after yourself like any other man on the ship.
Why, you talk as though it were damn serious.
I know that I had a famous line in it which I dragged out to such an extent that even Mr. DuPont was satisfied.
The ship has 3 hours to live.
Manchester!
In the actual acting and the dialogue and things, that it can change so enormously in a very few years to make it comic, it always surprises me. I can't understand it.
BIP had brought over actors and technicians from Germany. Did the British players and crew, many of whom had fought in the war, resent this German presence?
Oh, there was no anti-German feeling at all. Not remotely. I never sensed it. Cameramen, photographers, editors, people of that kind, they were delighted to find the Germans there. I mean, the German cinema was held in the highest possible esteem by the kind of people who were in the industry or the kind of people who'd just come into it.
German technique was still an example to the world.
Eine Stunde noch. Unsere Farce ist vorüber.
This film about a maritime disaster drew huge audiences, and in London the German and English versions were shown together.
Denn deines Vertreib und die Kraft und die Herrlichkeit in Ewigkeit.
A disaster film which was itself a disaster was made in France by the genius who had made Napoleon, Abel Gance. A comet is heading for the Earth, threatening to destroy mankind. In a salute to the League of Nations, Gance wanted to make a film dedicated to peace. He disliked sound, but faced up to it with courage. He wanted his film to be an encyclopedia of visual effects, like Napoleon, but allied to sound. The chief cameraman was Jules Crougier, who had photographed Napoleon. It was also to be made in 3 languages. Gance had a large budget of 5 million francs, but even so, his ideas were too ambitious. The film featured a notorious orgy sequence. Although she was starring in the German and English version, Van der Wengen saw nothing of it.
I wasn't allowed to. I was told you're not to come to the studio. I was too young, you see.
Gans locked the studio doors, provided the wine, and encouraged the extras to behave as if it was their last day on Earth. Gans kept having more and more ideas and adding more and more to the cost. During the production, the Wall Street crash occurred, and Ivanov, the producer, panicked. The film was taken out of Gans's hands. Its failure had a profound impact on his career.
Ça a été la catastrophe totale. Près d'1 an, au moment de l'arrivée du cinéma parlant, tous les cinéastes, sans exception, ont dit les choses et le contraire des choses. Ils ont tous été contre, puis pour. Tous étaient pour, puis contre.
Moi, j'ai prétendu que le fait que le cinéma ne soit plus infirme, c'était une bonne chose. Mais des gars comme René Clair, par exemple, n'étaient pas d'accord avec moi. On a eu de grandes discussions à ce sujet-là. Il me disait non, le cinéma était un art à part, c'est un art comme la musique, comme la sculpture. Ça va devenir maintenant une copie de la vie. Et à ce moment-là, ça ne m'intéresse plus.
Despite his opposition, Clair turned out to be one of the most inventive of the sound directors. Le Million was about a man who wins a lottery. His fiancée was played by Annabella.
René Clair était un personnage très étrange. Pendant 3 mois ou 6 mois, il restait chez lui travaillant sur le scénario. Même sa femme disait « ne répond pas au téléphone, il ne veut pas me parler ». Mais quand René Clair avait écrit à la fin du scénario le mot « fin », pour lui, le travail était fini et la joie commençait.
The winning ticket has been left in a jacket and the hero must get it back. Clair overlays the sound of a football match. Leading silent director Marcel L'Herbier was another reluctant convert. The German cinema, which had lost so many to America, now began to get them back. Emil Jannings, who had won an Oscar in Hollywood, had to return to Germany because his English wasn't good enough. Ironically, Pommer signed him to play a teacher of English.
Sie können ja noch nicht einmal den englischen Artikel aussprechen. Sprechen Sie mir nach. The. 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 Zähne auseinander. The. 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 Setzen.
Jannings recommended Hollywood director Joseph von Sternberg, who tested many actresses before deciding upon Marlene Dietrich.
Film 701, Sternberg, Frau Dietrich, 195.
She always claimed this was her first film. She had actually appeared in 17 Silents.
You're the cream in my coffee, you're the salt in my stew. You will always be my necessity, I'm lost without you. You're the cream in my coffee, you're the salt in my stew. You will always be my necessity, I'm lost without you. You're the cream in my coffee.
Mensch, was fällt dir eigentlich ein? Das geht doch so nicht, verstehst das nicht? Die ist auch ein Genie verloren gegangen. Dir wollte ich wieder den ollen Quatsch singen, nicht? Den kannst du. Jetzt aber falsch spielst, verstehst du? Dann gibt's einen Tritt.
Darum schwirren mich wie Mottern um das Licht. Und wenn sie verbrennen, ja, dafür kann ich nicht. Ich bin von Kopf bis Fuß auf Liebe eingestellt. Ich kann halt Liebe nur und sonst gar nicht.
The Blue Angel, in German and English, was such a success it put Ufer into profit for the first time since Metropolis. It was producer Pommer who brought to the German cinema the Operettenfilm.
Bald wird uns die Stunde schlagen, wo wir nicht mehr Smoking tragen. Ach, wie wird uns da zumut? Polo spielen, Austern essen, alles müssen wir vergessen. Ach, wie weh, doch sowas tut. Wir hatten Gut und Geld und tausenderlei. Nun ist das schöne Leben vorbei. Statt Whisky gibt's jetzt Limonade und statt Kaviar Marmelade. Großer Gott, wir sind bankrott.
Kuckuck, Kuckuck, ruft aus dem Wald. Schau, schau, mein Siegel klebt hier an jedem Stück. Gleich auf den ersten Blick sieht man's. Der pleite Geier krächzt, lieber Whisky, alles ist drin.
The Wall Street crash had brought the spectre of social unrest back to Germany. When people found their savings wiped out, they were desperate. In Italy, the fascists, in power for 10 years, celebrate with their leader Mussolini an aggressive nationalism. Yet the Italian cinema had still to come into its own again. The Italians came late to sound, but proved as bold and imaginative as they had with silent pictures. This film was directed by Gennaro Righelli. The girl, played by Dria Paula, has raised her mother's illegitimate child as her own. She now fears it has been taken away.
Il mio Ninni. Non rivedrò più il mio Ninni Enrico.
The German actress Leni Riefenstahl was now a celebrated star, anxious to direct her own film of a mountain legend. Producers discouraged her.
Leni, vergiss es, das wird nicht sein, um den Film so zu machen, wie du ihn machen möchtest, so stilisiert, so märchenhaft. Dazu brauchst du viel, viel Geld.
A young girl obsessed by a blue light, the secret of a mountain. Leni Riefenstahl co-authored this film with the Hungarian Bela Balázs. She starred in it and directed and produced it. She wanted it to use real locations yet produce a stylized result. She was told it could only be done expensively in a studio.
Ich habe da ein paar Tage drüber nachgedacht und dann ist mir eingefallen eine Lösung. Ich habe gesagt, weißt du, mir ist eingefallen, ich tue die Felswände einnebeln mit Nebel und wenn da das Licht durchfällt, dann ist es unwirklich. Und so gab es für jede Sache einen Ausweg, sondern dass sie etwas Märchenhaftes haben. Und das blaue Licht ist ja eine Legende, oder ich nannte es eine Legende. Der Film erschien, die Premiere war im Uferpalast. Es war eine Sensation. Der Filmkurier, die damals wichtigste Fachzeitung, geschrieben, der Himmel von Hollywood ist eingestürzt durch diesen Film.
One of the most popular stars in German films was a young English actress called Lillian Harvey, and this film, again made in 3 languages, was an international sensation. Producer Erich Pommer was determined to make international talkies to rival Hollywood, and this was his strongest contender. Such films were needed, for the Great Depression was spreading across Europe. Producers benefited from it as they had in the early 20s.
The German Depression was so high, and there were about 200 extras needed, and they hired the extras, and they paid 10 marks a day. And we'll see what we can do tomorrow, and suddenly for the next day there were 500 people waiting. So the producers, the production managers said, okay, we can only pay 8 marks a day. And they shot for the day. And then they said, for more then, because there were already people waiting, we can only pay 5 marks a day. And for the next day then, there was more and more people waiting to get those 5 marks. But then they said, now we can pay only 1 mark a day. And then they shot, and there were thousands of people waiting.
A mine disaster in France had occurred on the border with Germany. German miners came to the rescue with no thought of national enmity. Inspired by this event, G.W. Pabst made a film which pleaded for an end to national barriers.
Nicht heute, Obersteiger!
Es gibt Gas! Na los doch! Achtung, der Idiot schießt! Ida! Ne tirez pas! Laissez passer, c'est une équipe de sauveteurs allemands!
Social issues were now tackled with more courage and commitment than ever. Kameradschaft, comradeship, dealt with ordinary working people and showed their humanity in the face of danger. Germany was falling into anarchy. Political street fights happened every day. Red Front fought Brown Shirt, everyone fought the police. People looked for a strong leader. Nationalism was contagious. In France, the banners read, "French cinema for the French." René Clair, like Pabst, championed the individual against the system. His fantasy showed a man who had escaped from one prison being escorted to another, the workplace.
Tu ne travailles pas? Tu ne sais donc pas que...
Le travail est obligatoire. Car le travail, c'est la liberté.
The owner of UFA, Alfred Hugenberg, headed the German National Party. He felt Germany needed new leadership. President Hindenburg, here losing his way in a parade, was old and doddering. Hugenberg and other conservatives persuaded him to appoint as Chancellor the leader of the National Socialists, Adolf Hitler. His message now carried to the world by sound newsreels.
Deutschland nicht geschenkt erhielten, sondern uns selbst schaffen mussten.
Once Chancellor, Hitler would seize total control when Hindenburg died the following year. Hugenberg had been rewarded with 2 ministerial posts in Hitler's government. Here he attends the first cabinet meeting, which was filmed by UFA cameras. This man is the sort of cripple the Nazis might have eliminated had he not been a virulent anti-Semite, a propaganda genius, and future head of the German film industry. A few days after Hitler became Chancellor, Josef Goebbels attended with Hitler the Berlin premiere of the new UFA film Morgenrot, Dawn, a tribute to the U-boat crews of the Great War.
Frau Majorin, Nachricht vom U-Boot. Alles wohlbehalten und gesund. Extrablatt. Sie haben einen Panzerkreuzer versenkt. Alle Zeitungen.
One of the stars of Morgenrot was Camilla Spierer.
Und das war eine Sensation in Berlin. Denn es war zum ersten Mal in diesem großen Ufertheater am Zoo, war die ganze Mörderregime war zugegen. Dann wurde jedem von uns, die Adele Sandrock, dem Forster, Rudolf Forster und mir, Camilla Spierer, ein riesen Lorbeerkranz um den Hals gehängt. Und bei mir stand auf einer grünen Moiré-Schleife der Darstellerin der deutschen Frau die Ufer.
Camilla Spierer was beautiful, blonde and Jewish.
Am 1. kamen die Judengesetze raus. Vom 1. Mai ab, April, Mai, ja, durfte ich nicht mehr arbeiten.
As attacks on Jews became more frequent, more and more left the country.
If I were not the king, what then?
Charles Laughton played Henry VIII in a British film directed by Alexander Korda.
He must be the strongest man in all England.
Oh, but one. The strongest man in England sits beside you.
Of course, darling. I know. You've thrown every wrestler in your time.
In my time?
Korda and the entire British film industry would benefit enormously from the influx of Jewish film people forced out by Hitler. Laughton's performance won for England her first Oscar. In Korda, a Hungarian Jew, Britain had the producer she needed. In Pommer, a German Jew, Ufer had an even greater producer, but his future was now uncertain.
He immediately went to Klitsch and said, since I'm Jewish, would it be better for you if you would release me now from the contract? And Ludwig Klitsch told him, Ufer stands and falls with his Jewish friends. That lasted about 2 weeks.
At the time, Leni Riefenstahl admired Hitler, but witnessed a great change.
Denn Dr. Goebbels, der Propagandaminister war und der den deutschen Film unter sich hat, dem haben wahrscheinlich nicht alle diese Filme gefallen, die uns gefallen haben. Vor allen Dingen Pommer ging aus Deutschland weg, der ein großartiger, sagen wir mal, Chef war und gefördert hat den guten Film. Und es sind viele gute Leute, die leider Deutschland verlassen haben. Und das war sozusagen eine Blutabnahme am deutschen Film.
Das Zeitalter eines überspitzten jüdischen Intellektualismus ist nun zu Ende.
Goebbels admired film and determined to use it for Hitler's cause. But when he burnt the books, he struck at the heart of German culture, of which cinema was now so vital a part.
Ich übergebe dem Feuer die Schriften von Heinrich Mann, Ernst Gläser, Erich Kästner.
Und das hat sich ja sehr unangenehm in der deutschen Produktion bemerkbar gemacht. Eine Menge Sachwissen verschwand. Eine Menge internationale Beziehungen waren weg. Der deutsche Film wurde in dem Moment, wo die Juden ausschieden, provinziell.
The Nazi Party commissioned one great film, Leni Riefenstahl's record of a Nuremberg rally. Hitler claimed there were too many Jews in the industry. By the time they had left, so had most of the talent. Still, he wasn't satisfied. His censors banned reissues of pre-Nazi films regarded as unhealthy. Films which had astounded audiences all over the world could never be seen again. Films like Kameradschaft, no film which had challenged authority was allowed to be revived.
Je te demande pardon, mon vieux, c'est pas de ma faute.
The Nazis recognized the power of film, carried on that shaft of light which had first shone out of the darkness nearly 40 years before. Images like these might never have been produced at all had the Nazis arrived just a few years earlier. With the silent era ending, the talent from several European countries came together to produce a masterpiece. It was made in France, but was an international film of the finest sort. In the new Europe, such cooperation was no longer possible. With the rise of the Third Reich, the possibility that European cinema could rival Hollywood was dead.